Roman Stanisław Dmowski was a Polish politician, statesman, and co-founder and chief ideologue of the right-wing national democracy political movement. He saw the aggressive Germanization of Polish territories controlled by the German Empire as the major threat to Polish culture and therefore advocated a degree of accommodation with another power that had partitioned Poland, the Russian Empire. He favored the re-establishment of Polish independence by non-violent means, and supported policies favorable to the Polish middle class. During World War I, in Paris, through his Polish National Committee he was a prominent spokesman to the Allies for Polish aspirations. He was a principal figure instrumental in the post-war restoration of Poland's independent existence. Dmowski never wielded official political power, except for a brief period in 1923 as Minister of Foreign Affairs. Nevertheless, he was one of the most influential Polish ideologues and politicians of his time, a controversial personality all his life and since. Dmowski believed that only a Polish-speaking Roman Catholic could be a good Pole. His thinking marginalized other minorities, and he was vocally anti-Semitic. In 1926 he attempted to emulate Italian fascism. He remains the prototype of Polish right-wing nationalism and has been called the father of Polish nationalism. Throughout most of his life, he was the chief opponent of the Polish military and political leader Józef Pilsudski and of the latter's vision of Poland as a multinational federation. Early life. Dmowski was born on 9 August 1864 in Warsaw's Kamieniec district, in Congress, Poland, then part of the Russian Empire. His father was a road construction worker and later an entrepreneur. Dmowski attended schools in Warsaw, studying biology and zoology at Warsaw University, from which he graduated in 1891. As a student he became active in the Polish Youth Association (ZET), where he was active in opposing socialist activists. He also organized a student street demonstration on the 100th anniversary of the Polish Constitution of 3 May 1791. For this he was imprisoned by the Russian Tsarist authorities for 5 months in the Warsaw Citadel. Since 1890 he was also developing as a writer and publicist, publishing political and literary critique in Gloss, where he became close friends with Jan Ludwik Poplawski, who would be his mentor. In April 1893 Dmowski co-founded the National League and became its first leader. In November that year he was sentenced to exile from the Vistula land. Dmowski went to Jelgava and soon afterward in early 1895 to Lemberg, Austria-Hungary, where together with Poplawski he began to publish a new magazine, Przegład Wsek Polski. In 1897, he co-founded the National Democratic Party. The idea was to serve as a political party, a lobby group and an underground organization that would unite Poles who espoused Dmowski's views into a disciplined and committed political group. In 1899, Dmowski founded the Society for National Education as an ancillary group. From 1898 to 1900, he resided in both France and Britain, and traveled to Brazil. In 1901 he took up residence in Kraków, then part of the Austrian partition of Poland. In 1903 he published a book, Myśli Nowoczesnego Polaka, one of the first if not the first nationalist manifesto in European history. Dmowski opposed revolutionary means of fighting, preferring political struggle, and aimed for independence through increased autonomy. After the outbreak of the Russo-Japanese War, Dmowski met with Colonel Akashi Motojiro, the Japanese military attaché in Sweden and spy master for Japanese intelligence activities, in Kraków in March 1904. Although reluctant to collaborate with the Japanese, Dmowski agreed to Akashi's proposal that Polish soldiers in Manchuria might be encouraged to defect to the Imperial Japanese Army. He traveled to Tokyo to work out the details, and at the same time made a successful effort to prevent the Japanese from aiding a rival Polish political activist, Józef Pilsudski, who wanted assistance for a planned insurrection in Poland, an aspiration which Dmowski felt would be doomed to failure. In 1905, Dmowski moved to Warsaw, back in the Russian partition of Poland, where he continued to play a growing role in the Indecke faction. During the Russian Revolution of 1905, Dmowski favored cooperation with the Imperial Russian authorities and welcomed Nicholas II's October Manifesto of 1905 as a stepping stone on the road towards renewed Polish autonomy. During the revolt in Łódź in June 1905, the Index, acting under Dmowski's orders, opposed the uprising led by Pilsudski's Polish Socialist Party. During the course of the June days, as the Łódź uprising is known, a miniature civil war raged between Indecke and the PPS. As a result of the elections to the First Duma, which were boycotted by the PPS, the National Democrats won 34 of the 55 seats allotted to Poland. Dmowski himself was elected a deputy to the Second and Third Duma and was president of the Polish caucus within it. He was seen as a conservative, and despite being a Polish caucus leader, he often had more influence on the Russian than the Polish deputies. Over time, Dmowski became more receptive to Russian overtures, particularly Neo-Slavism, warming up to the idea that Poland and Russia may have a common future, particularly due to Germany being the common enemy. In light of what he regarded as Russian cultural inferiority, Dmowski felt that a strong Russia was more acceptable than a strong Germany. In Dmowski's view, the Russian policy of Russification would not succeed in subjugating the Poles, while the Germans would be far more successful with the Germanization policies. He explained those views in his book Niemcy Roja I Kwestia Polska, published in 1908. This was not a universally popular attitude, and in 1909 Dmowski resigned his deputy mandate to focus on an internal political struggle within Indecke. He lost the election to the Fourth Duma in 1912 to a socialist politician, Eugeniusz Jagiello from the Polish Socialist Party, Left, who won with the support of the Jewish vote. Dmowski viewed this as a personal insult. In exchange, he organized a successful boycott of Jewish businesses throughout much of Poland. World War I. In 1914, Dmowski praised the Grand Duke Nicholas's manifesto to the Polish nation of 14 August, which vaguely assured the Tsar's Polish subjects that there would be greater autonomy for Congress Poland after the war, and that the Austrian provinces of East and West Galicia, together with the Pomerania province of Prussia, would be annexed to the Kingdom of Poland when the German Empire in Austria-Hungary were defeated. However, subsequent attempts on the part of Dmowski to have the Russians make firmer commitments along the lines of the Grand Duke Nicholas's manifesto were met with elusive answers. Nonetheless, Dmowski's pro-Russian and anti-German propaganda succeeded in frustrating Pilsudski's plans of causing an anti-Russian uprising, and bolstered his position as an important Polish political figure on the international scene, especially with the Triple Entente. In November he became one of the active members of the Polish National Committee. In 1915, Dmowski, increasingly convinced of Russia's impending defeat, decided that to support the cause of Polish independence he should go abroad to campaign on behalf of Poland in the capitals of the Western Allies. During his lobbying efforts, his friends included such opinion makers as the British journalist Wickham Steed, In particular, Dmowski was very successful in France, where he made a very favorable impression on public opinion. He gave a series of lectures at Cambridge University, which impressed the local faculty enough that he was given an honorary doctorate. In August 1917, in Paris, he created a new Polish National Committee aimed at rebuilding a Polish state. That year he also published, at his own expense, Problems of Central and Eastern Europe, that he soon distributed among numerous English-speaking diplomats. He was a vocal critic of Austro-Hungary, and campaigned for the creation of a number of Slavic states in its place. Within the Polish political community, he opposed those who supported allying themselves with Germany and Austria-Hungary, including supporters of a vague German proposal for a Regency Kingdom of Poland, with undefined borders, that Germany promised to create after World War I. In 1917, Dmowski laid out a plan for the borders of a recreated Polish state. It would include Greater Poland, Pomerania with Gdansk, Upper Silesia, South Strip of East Prussia and Cieszyn Silesia. In September that year, Dmowski's National Committee was recognized by the French as the legitimate government of Poland. The British and the Americans were less enthusiastic about Dmowski's National Committee, but likewise recognized it as Poland's government a year later. However, the Americans refused to provide backing for what they regarded as Dmowski's excessive territorial claims. The American President Woodrow Wilson reported, "I saw Mr. Dmowski and Mr. Paderewski in Washington, and I asked them to define Poland for me, as they understood it, and they presented me with a map in which they claimed a large part of the earth." In part, Wilson's objections stemmed from dislike of Dmowski personally. One British diplomat stated, "He was a clever man, and clever men are distrusted. He was logical in his political theories, and we hate logic, and he was persistent with a tenacity which was calculated to drive everybody mad." Another area of objection to Dmowski was with his anti-Semitic remarks, as in a speech he delivered at a dinner organized by the writer G.K. Chesterton, that began with the words, "My religion came from Jesus Christ, who was murdered by the Jews." Quote, when British Prime Minister David Lloyd George criticised Dmowski and the committee, Dmowski saw this as a result of Lloyd George's representation of Jewish interests. He refused to admit of single Polish due to the National Committee, despite support for such a proposal from Paderewski. A number of American and British Jewish organizations campaigned during the war against the governments recognizing the National Committee. Another leading critic of Dmowski was the historian Sir Louis Namier, a Jew who served as the British Foreign Office's resident expert on Poland during the war, and who claimed to be personally offended by anti-Semitic remarks made by Dmowski. Namier fought hard against British recognition of Dmowski and his chauvinist gang. In turn, Dmowski's experiences at the time convinced him of the existence of an international Judeo-Masonic conspiracy, unfriendly towards Poland and intransigently hostile to his party. After World War I, at the end of the World War II, governments claimed to be the legitimate governments of Poland, Dmowski's in Paris and Pilsudski's in Warsaw, to put an end to the rival claims of Pilsudski and Dmowski. The composer Ignacy Jan Paderewski met with both men and persuaded them to reluctantly join forces. Both men had something that the other needed. Pilsudski was in possession of Poland after the war, but as the Pole who had fought with the Austrians for the Central Powers against the Russians, he was distrusted by the Allies. Pilsudski's newly reborn Polish army, formed from his Polish legions, needed arms from the Allies, something that Dmowski was much better suited to persuade the Allies to deliver upon. Beyond that, the the French were planning to send the Blue Army of General Joseph Haller, loyal to Dmowski, back to Poland. The fear was that if Pilsudski and Dmowski did not put aside their differences, a civil war might break out between the partisans. Paderewski was successful in working out a compromise in which Dmowski and himself were to represent Poland at the Paris Peace Conference, while Pilsudski was to serve as provisional president of Poland. Not all of Dmowski's supporters accepted this compromise, and on the 5th of January 1919, Dmowski's partisans attempted a failed coup against Pilsudski. As a Polish delegate at the Paris Peace Conference and a signatory of the Versailles Treaty, Dmowski exerted substantial influence on the treaty's favorable decisions regarding Poland. On the 29th of January 1919, Dmowski met with the Allies' Supreme War Council for the first time. His 5-hour presentation there, delivered in English and French, was described as brilliant. At the meeting, Dmowski stated that he had little interest in laying claim to areas of Ukraine and Lithuania that were formerly part of Poland, but no longer had a Polish majority. At the same time, Dmowski strongly pressed for the return of Polish territories with Polish-speaking majorities taken by Prussia from Poland in 1790s. Dmowski himself admitted that from a purely historical point of view, the Polish claims to Silesia were not entirely strong, but he claimed it for Poland on economic grounds, especially the coal fields. Moreover, Dmowski claimed that German statistics had lied about the number of ethnic Poles living in Eastern Germany and that these Poles were some of the most educated and highly cultured in the nation, with a strong sense of nationality and men of progressive ideas. In addition, Dmowski, with the strong backing of the French, wanted to send the Blue Army to Poland via Danzig, Germany. It was the intention of both Dmowski and the French that the Blue Army create a territorial fait accompli. This proposal created much opposition from the Germans, the British and the Americans, and finally the Blue Army was sent to Poland in April 1919 via land. Pilsudski was opposed to needlessly annoying the Allies, and it has been suggested that he did not care much about the Danzig issue. In regard to Lithuania, Dmowski didn't view Lithuanians as having a strong national identity, and viewed the social organization as tribal. Those areas of Lithuania that had either Polish majorities or minorities were claimed by Dmowski on the grounds of self-determination. In the areas with Polish minorities, the Poles would act as a civilizing influence. Only the northern part of Lithuania, which had a solid Lithuanian majority, was Dmowski willing to concede to the Lithuanians. His initial plans for Lithuania involved giving it an autonomy within a Polish state. This caused Dmowski to have very acrimonious disputes with the Lithuanian delegation at Paris. With regard to the former Austrian province of East Galicia, Dmowski claimed that the local Ukrainians were quite incapable of ruling themselves and also required the civilizing influence of Polish leadership. In addition, Dmowski wished to acquire the oil fields of Galicia. His support for that was, however, more lackluster than that for other regions, and he opposed Pilsudski's proposal of an alliance or federation with the Ukrainians. From the Allied powers, only the French supported Polish claims to Galicia wholeheartedly. In the end, it was the actual fighting on the ground in Galicia, and not the decisions of the diplomats in Paris, that decided that the region would be part of Poland. The French did not back Dmowski's aspirations in the Silesia region, and instead supported the claims of Czechoslovakia. Dmowski since a long time praised Czechs as model for national restoration in face of Germanization, and despite his dispute with Czech political leaders, his opinion of the Czech people as a whole remained positive. Forever a political opponent of of Pilsudski, Dmowski favored what he called a national state, a state in which the citizens would speak Polish and be of the Roman Catholic faith. If Pilsudski's vision of Poland was based on the historical multi-ethnic state that had existed under the Jagiellonian dynasty, which he hoped to recreate with a multinational federation, Dmowski's vision was the earlier Polish kingdom ruled by the Piast dynasty, ethnically and religiously homogeneous. Pilsudski believed in a wide definition of Polish citizenship in which peoples of different languages, cultures and faiths were to be united by common loyalty to the reborn Polish state. Dmowski regarded Pilsudski's views as dangerous nonsense, and felt that the presence of large number of ethnic minorities would undermine the security of Polish state. At the Paris Peace Conference, he argued strenuously against the minority rights treaty forced on Poland by the Allies. Dmowski himself was disappointed with the Treaty of Versailles, partly because he was strongly opposed to the minority rights treaty imposed on Poland and partly because he wanted the German-Polish border to be somewhat farther to the west than what the Versailles had allowed. Both of these disappointments Dmowski blamed on what he claimed was the international Jewish conspiracy. Throughout his life, Dmowski maintained that the British Prime Minister David Lloyd George had been bribed by a syndicate of German Jewish financiers to give Poland what Dmowski considered to be an unfavorable frontier with Germany. His relations with Lloyd George were very poor. Dmowski found Lloyd George to be arrogant, unscrupulous and a consistent advocate of ruling against Polish claims to the West and the East. Dmowski was very offended by Lloyd George's ignorance of Polish affairs and in particular was enraged by his lack of knowledge about river traffic. On the Vistula, Dmowski called Lloyd George the agent of the Jews. Lloyd George in turn claimed in 1939 that Poland had deserved its fate. Later life, Dmowski was a deputy to the 1919 Legislative Sejm, but he attended only a single session, seeing the Sejm as too chaotic for him to exert much influence. He also spent much of that year either in Paris or recuperating from a lung infection. In Algeria, he reorganized Indeka into a new party, Popular National Union. During the Polish-Soviet War he was a member of the Council of National Defense and a vocal critic of Pilsudski's policies. In the aftermath of the war, Polish eastern borders were similar, if somewhat smaller, from what became known as the Dmowski's line. When the time came to write a Polish constitution in the early 1920s, the National Democrats insisted upon a weak presidency and strong legislative branch. Dmowski was convinced that Pilsudski would become president and saw a weak executive mandate as the best way of crippling his rival. The Constitution of 1921 did indeed outline a government with a weak executive branch. When Gabriel Narutowicz, a friend of Pilsudski, was elected president by the Sejm in 1922, he was seen by many among Indeka as having been elected with the support of the parties representing the national minorities, with the notable backing of the Polish Jewish politician Yitzhak Ruenbaum. After Narutowicz's election, the National Democrats started a major campaign of vilification of the Jewish president elected by foreigners. Subsequently, a fanatical National Democratic supporter, painter Elegius Niewiadomski, assassinated Narutowicz. He was a minister of foreign affairs from October to December 1923 in the government of Wincenty Witos. That year he received the Order of Polonia Restituta from the government of Władysław Sikorski. In 1926, in the aftermath of Pilsudski's Movement.He, Dmowski founded the Camp of Great Poland, though he would find himself more of an ideologue than a leader, as he was displaced by new, younger politicians. In 1928 he founded the National Party. He kept publishing newspaper articles, brochures and books. With declining health, he mostly retired from politics by 1930. In 1934, a section of the youth wing of the Anti-Semitic found Dmowski insufficiently hardline for their taste and broke away to found the more radical National Radical camp. His last major campaign was a series of political attacks on the alleged Judeo-Masonic associates of President Ignacy Mościcki. Death. In 1937, Dmowski, previously leaning towards ancestor worship, returned to the Catholic Church. Weakening in health, Dmowski moved to the village of Drozdowo near Lomza, where he died on the 2nd of January 1939. Dmowski was buried at the Brodno Cemetery in Warsaw in the family grave. His funeral was widely attended, with at least 100,000 attendees. The Pilsudski's legacy Sanucki government snubbed him without any official representative attending.